We witness the birth of a movie monster icon in this classic from 1954, as well as taking a dive into its American counterpart. Welcome to the first episode of the Atomic Lizards podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Atomic Lizard podcast. We're a trio of friends podcasting about the Godzilla franchise and other films we love. I'm Miranda, the film fanatic.
I'm Udi, the de facto film expert.
Dan, the kaiju extraordinaire.
And today we are talking about Godzilla, more specifically Godzilla 1954, and the American recut from 1956 titled Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
First up today, we'll be talking about the original Godzilla from 1954. The part I'm about to read next comes from the Criterion Collection website, and it says that Godzilla, aka Gojira, is the roaring granddaddy of all monster movies. It's a remarkably humane and melancholy drama, made in Japan at a time when the country was reeling from nuclear attack and H-bomb testing in the Pacific. Godzilla is a rampaging radioactive beast, the embodiment of an entire population's fears.
Godzilla, also known as Gojira, was directed by Ishiro Honda, produced by Tomoyuki Tanaka, with music by Akira Ifukube and special effects by Eiji Tsuburaya. Toho Co. released the film in Japan on November 3rd, 1954, which is now considered to be Godzilla Day.
So, what is your relationship to Godzilla? What did you think of the original movie? What are your initial thoughts?
I guess I'll go first. So, my relationship with Godzilla goes all the way back to like my childhood. I have been a Godzilla fan my entire life, ever since when the original or not the original, but like when the first American Godzilla film came out in 1998. I remember watching that on TV for the first time, and that was my first introduction to the franchise, to the character of Godzilla. And like I remember my mother got me this toy from the movie, and like I loved that toy. It was really cool. It was big, and I loved playing with it. And then like I for the longest time, like I thought that was like the only version of Godzilla to exist. But then my dad was like, "Hey, there's also the older Godzilla movies," and I was like, What are you talking about?" And he showed me some of the older ones on TV, and then the rest is just history. I remember recording a lot of the older movies back on VHS, and that still existed, uh, and just watching those recordings over and over and over again. I love Godzilla. I've seen every single film countless amount of times, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the future brings for this giant radioactive lizard. So what about you guys? What is your relation to Godzilla? How did you first discover the franchise per se?
My relationship with Godzilla started about a year or two ago. I watched the original 54 one, and I thought it was really good. And then I found this YouTuber who watched all of the Showa era Godzilla movies at the same time, and I found that very fascinating because some things line up, like the logo, but other things didn't line up. Or sometimes, like 3 or 4 films would have aliens on screen, and then I was like, "There's aliens in Godzilla movies," and then I learned about Space Godzilla, and then I was very interested and was determined to watch them all. And instead of doing it by myself, we have created this podcast here to do it, to watch all of them. And then I started reading about Godzilla and seen about 8 of them now, ranging from the really new American ones all the way to the original. So that's where I am in my knowledge of Godzilla right now.
All right, awesome. What about you, Udi? I know your experience with the franchise is a lot more limited than mine and Miranda's.
I was going to say that my relationship with Godzilla has been going very steady the last few months, but I guess I'm going to have to break up with him because clearly he's three-timing all of us. So,
My God.
um, no, but yeah, I've always had an interest in the Godzilla movies to some degree. I never really watched any though until I think the 2014 reboot was my first one that I actually watched. I may have watched bits and pieces of other ones across the years, like on TV, but it was only ever small, short pieces of just random ones. I have no idea which ones it would be. Um, I obviously knew that the character in the movies existed. I don't know. Either I don't know that it wasn't a lack of interest. I just don't know that there was enough interest necessarily to seek it out per se. I guess I don't know, but yeah. So I watched the 2014 one, liked it. I liked it more later after the fact. I remember when I first watched it, I thought it was a little boring. But now I actually really, really like it. I think it's not boring anymore, but that, controversial. But and then I've watched the rest of like the more modern day MonsterVerse movies from to come out of Warner Brothers. And then obviously we watched these new ones, or not new ones, the originals. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
All right. Well, great. So we all have some experience with Godzilla, be it a little or a lot. And this is what brought us here today is with the very first film that released in 1954. So let's start talking about that. I guess I'll start off. So my thoughts on the 1954 film. I mean, what can I say? It really is the birth of a movie monster icon. It's an instant classic within the kaiju community, and it's arguably the most famous kaiju movie of all time. What I like about this movie is how it is able to maintain such a dramatic and serious tone without it feeling too out of place. Like, think about the later movies in the Godzilla franchise. You know, they get kind of silly at times and very campy, and to the point where it's like almost comedic. And like if you were to try and like place the type of tone that this movie gives off and put it in those later sillier campy movies, it wouldn't really work because of how serious the subject matter is. Of course, the obvious reasoning for taking such a subject matter so seriously is because the 1954 Godzilla is an allegory for nuclear bomb testing. And I mean, in 1945, the country of Japan was devastated by two nuclear bomb attacks on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And having lived through such an attack, it only makes sense for Japanese filmmakers at the time to want to tell stories of what it was like to live through such a tragedy. And Godzilla is the vessel that is used to recreate the dangers of the atomic bomb. But you see, like, Godzilla isn't just a destructive monster. He's the direct result of the continued use of atomic bombs. Without the atomic bomb, there would be no Godzilla. When Godzilla is destroying Tokyo, much of the destruction he causes is likened to the destruction of the atomic bomb. And from destroyed buildings to thousands of lives lost and people being affected with radiation poisoning, Godzilla in a sense is the atomic bomb, and that's what's so like interesting about this movie, because the themes behind that are very very real. I'll let you guys talk now because I feel like I've talked for a while.
Yeah, like you said, the atomic bomb and H bombs are very present in this movie. It's anti-nuclear bombs. They like the whole reason Godzilla is back and awake and attacking is because of the testing out in the oceans and the bombs that the U.S. sent to Japan during the war, which like they were just they had all these thoughts and they needed to process it, and that's how we got Godzilla. And it is very different from the more modern ones. Although some of the older Godzillas still carry like more deeper themes. Like I think one is about like pollution and how that's bad for the environment and stuff. So like there is still those like elements throughout the franchise, but this one very much is like the film that well it started Godzilla, but um is more of a film where the other ones are like more of a movies. And some of my general thoughts of like just the movie in general is that I think it was really well written. Of course, I don't know Japanese, so I have to read the English subtitles. And since I watched it through the Criteria collection, I am assuming they're very close to accurate. I might be missing some of the more nuanced elements of Godzilla because I'm an American, so like obviously I'm not Japanese and I don't speak Japanese. So I'm probably missing some stuff here, but I think as it is a classic piece of cinema and I think everyone should watch it, whether it's for the plot or just the skill and dedication that these creators put into it. The sets are really good. The comping or the matte painting are really good. The suit actors are really good. They really thought and took the time to like make a good, emotional, relatable story, and it's, I think, should be on your top 100 movie list of all time.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I think of up until we get to the more modern day ones, I'm pretty positive I had in my brain that I was gonna like this the most until we get to like the more present day ones. And lo and behold, I mean, yeah, I think I was right in thinking that because even though it starts out a little goofy in some parts, like the huge crowds following the main characters around at point I'm like, okay, like there would not be like a town's worth of people following four main characters around on this adventure to find Godzilla and track him or whatever. I felt a little excessive, but I think if anything, maybe that was more symbolic. Yeah, I really liked this movie. I think like I knew going in that this was just very like anti-nuclear weapon. Um, like it was that was like the general message to get away from the movie. And obviously given history, I mean it makes sense. And also I didn't fact check this to make sure it was true, but I was reading that so not only did they get bombed obviously in 1945, but apparently like the US was overseeing H-bomb testing at the time. I think like somewhere near Japan or in the Pacific, and so like I can't imagine the fear of like having the most powerful weapons ever created on the face of the planet dropped in your country, to seeing like devastation on scale that we couldn't possibly fathom. And then years later, the people that did that also overseeing other weapons of mass destruction testing, like right nearby, basically like on your doorstep, being like, "Hey, remember what we just did like a few years ago?" I
Yeah,
can't imagine like the existential fear of that.
yeah, honestly, that's terrifying to think about.
Yeah, and so I feel like this being a byproduct of that. Uh, I mean, in one way, perfectly encapsulates what I love about art, in that you take something that is you take very human feelings and emotions and you convert it into something that you can visualize. And I think Godzilla is like the perfect encapsulation of that. And I don't know if I just happened to recently watch the original Alien a few days ago again, and I forgot how slow that movie was. But in a lot of ways, watching Godzilla right after watching that again, they're both kind of similar in a sense of like it's a very slow burn, all like practical effects with the monsters. And so because I love Alien so much, I think rewatching or watching Godzilla, having freshly rewatched that, there was a lot of similarities in how kind of like the monsters were shot. Like obviously it's just like guy in a suit, but I didn't even really notice the guy in the suit that much. Maybe it's just because I was trying to immerse myself in what was going on, but I really feel like especially the raid on Tokyo was really well done, especially given the time frame when this was made. It was crazy how good it still looks.
Yeah.
I think they did an excellent job with the miniatures. There's only one scene in the movie, the whole movie, where I was like, okay, that's very clearly. I mean, there was a few scenes where I could tell it was miniatures, but there was one that was particularly bad. It was like a helicopter. I'm like,
I
that's
know
just a toy
yeah,
helicopter.
I know exactly what scene you're talking about. Yeah.
But other than that, I think everything else is really well done. And like honestly, I mean, I really love horror movies, and so it wasn't scary, but I do feel like they
The
really did
concepts are
capture.
scary.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. The concepts are scary, but um even like the way that Godzilla looked in certain shots and stuff, especially again in the Tokyo raid, like the nighttime and everything, the way that the lighting like covered his scales and like it's just very grotesque in the sound design too, especially again for the time period and everything, really well done. I can't imagine living in the 1950s and hearing that. That would be horrifying.
Yeah.
So they did a really great job with all of that, and I really really did enjoy it. The 1954 version.
Yeah. Well, because it's interesting you mentioned like the how the film looks during the scene in Tokyo because like I just think of like it's nighttime, the city's on fire, and you just see this like big looming figure, and then just see the scales light up on the back, and then more fire just comes out. Like that's such a very like daunting image to capture right there. So I agree with you on that aspect. And speaking of like the destruction scenes, like the destruction scene in Tokyo, not only is that probably like the most famous scene in the movie, but that's one of my favorite scenes. It's just like you were saying, it's very well done, the most memorable part of the movie. And like a lot of famous shots come from that scene. And in fact, I'm pretty sure like when this movie came out in Japan, like there's a shot where Godzilla is like walking towards like the Toho theater, and there were people that actually ran out of the theater because they were thinking, "Oh my God, is this real? Like what's going on?"
It's like kind of funny thinking about it now, but I mean, I can understand.
Yeah.
I wonder if the reactions of um people seeing it in the 50s and then comparing that to like the reactions that people went and saw Jaws. Like obviously Godzilla is a fictional creature, um, and sharks are real, so like there's like different results on like people seeing Jaws, and then they're like sharks are evil or whatever, which they're not. They're actually pretty cool. But it must have been like similar to like that reaction where it like have actual reactions, or like the first time they like showed a movie and it was a train and people were jumping out of the way. It must have been like that, I feel like.
Or even like when they were showing The Exorcist and people were like literally running out of the theater in terror. But I wanted to also mention because like Udi, you were talking about how during that scene like Godzilla just looked like grotesque and and everything. So like the texture of like the Godzilla suit was made to kind of symbolize how burn victims from the atomic bombing looked. Like that's kind of like
Mm,
how they made Godzilla's skin. And yeah, once again, it just brings up the whole idea of Godzilla just being a symbol for the atomic bomb, for nuclear bombing or nuclear bomb testing and whatnot. Because yeah, and there's a scene in the movie where shortly after Godzilla surfaces, there's like a woman on a subway, and she's talking about, man, I just narrowly escaped the bomb in what did she say, Hiroshima, I think.
Hiroshima, yeah, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just narrowly escaped the bomb in Hiroshima, and now I got this to deal with. It is very morbid with just how casually she says, "Yeah, I just barely escaped the one in Hiroshima." Like, man, I just barely escaped. Like it's just how nonchalantly she's talking about it is kind of morbid in a way because that bomb was just with how deadly it was to just be talking about it in such a nonchalant way is just I don't know, it just makes me feel uneasy.
Yeah. I mean, that is kind of
Yeah.
just like human nature, I feel like. I mean, we we go through like something horrific and it just eventually becomes casual, even if like it still may haunt us or whatever, but to some degree we always or we usually um kind of mm, make it like a more casual subject matter and just kind
Yeah.
of lightly blow it off. Obviously, depending on the context and the subject matter, blah blah blah. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a feeling of kind of like fear. I feel like in her and the guy's voice because I think he also narrowly escaped too, right? That she was talking to.
I'm not sure actually if he did. Cause like he was kind of messing around with her, cause she was like saying, "Oh, what now?" And he's like, "Well, he's gonna come get you next or whatever."
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. But didn't they? Not spoiler alert, but didn't they end up getting attacked when they were on the boat later on?
I don't know if those were the same
Mm.
characters because I think the boat scene happened before the train scene because
Yeah,
that was to show that the depth charge attack on Godzilla didn't work, that he was still around.
Mm,
So, and then it cuts
gotcha.
to the train scene. Yeah.
the people on the train, they're like, well, I don't want to like evacuate again. Like,
Okay. Oh, I had like I had one thing I was gonna say before, and then what you just said kind of not that it's even remotely the same because it's not at all, but what you just said it almost kind of reminds me of like hearing people talk about like the pandemic and like COVID right now, where it's like people have been saying like, yeah, man, like the pandemic is really rough, but I don't think I could do it again. Like if they made us like mask up and stay inside again. Like I don't think I'd do it. And it's just like
Yeah.
on the one hand, like you understand, like it was a really rough time, and obviously, again, not even remotely the same as the nuclear bombings because that was extensively worse and inhumane and wrong. But um, like you can understand the sentiment, like, oh, I wouldn't want to do this again, like blah blah blah. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's just like it's just crazy. Um, I guess like you go through one horrific event and then like it may happen again, you don't know, and you hope that it doesn't happen. You hope more than anything it doesn't happen again, but at the end of the day you can never know. But
Yeah.
going back to what you were like talking about, like the Tokyo raid and whatever, I did appreciate, and I'm sure this really really hit home for them when like this was playing in theaters in 1954. But and just to make it even more obvious, but the end, like when they're shooting the scenes of the devastation in Tokyo after Godzilla attacked, um, it just looked like the nuclear bombing sites like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I mean, one obviously it painted a very clear picture of like what Godzilla was supposed to represent, but I can't imagine the feeling of like seeing that on screen and like after having had lived it, seeing and like the catharsis of seeing that on screen and like the emotion of seeing that happen and yada yada yada. That sounds like it looks like you want to say something.
All right. Well, I just want to say I want to bring that up because like what this film does is something I want to see again in a Godzilla movie because we haven't gotten anything like this in a while in Godzilla movies where it shows the effect that his attack has on humanity. Like the aftermath after his attack on Tokyo where you just had people dead, you had children crying, you had like people injured. Like I want more Godzilla movies to show something like that again because, like, like in the end, we tend to forget, oh, these are just crazy giant monster battles happening. But I mean, these attacks are destructive and they have an effect on the people that it's happening to. And I I wish more films. No, not that I wish more films. I just want to see more movies do that. Like, and you see, that's another aspect of this movie that I like is how serious it is. Like, I want to see another dark Godzilla movie like this, like one that has a more serious tone. Like I think the closest we got to another Godzilla movie having a tone like this was probably Shin Godzilla, and I think Godzilla 20. You could argue there are moments of Godzilla 2014 that can be like that, but like there's that scene where you had the mother and her children, and then she's like, "We're
oh
gonna
my
go see,
gosh, that scene,
we're gonna go see Daddy now." Like,
heartbreaking.
my God, like
It's heartbreaking.
it
Like
is very heartbreaking. Yeah.
I
I want more
remember,
Godzilla movies to have scenes like that.
I I remember watching the movie for the first time, and I'm sitting in my living room, it, like just fully engaged in the movie, and that scene comes up, and she's just like, Godzilla is coming for them, like, and she's just like, we're gonna go see your dad, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna die. This is heartbreaking and sad,
Uh,
and this movie just has a very good human story that
exactly.
draws on all of your emotions because there's parts where you're like generally like terrified and sad and just feel like everything that's going on is like just terrible. But then they also like include other parts of like emotions like um you have two ends of a discussion that they're having like, do they kill Godzilla or do they study Godzilla? And it makes you really think about both sides of the perspective and how they're feeling. So that's like the professor and then Dr. Sarazawa. They're the two ends of that like spectrum, and they're really good at showing and making you feel everything, and then the music on top of that just adds another layer of like emotion, because that's majority of the time that's what the music's there is to help like sell that emotion and stuff, and is very good. And I agree, I think more movies should be doing that, and maybe less of the like mainstream stuff
Or it's just a silly
needs to
giant monster
change.
brawl. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't speak for Shin Godzilla because I haven't watched it yet. Although I did, my friend did let me borrow it, so I will be watching it soon. Even though we're gonna watch it eventually later. But yeah, I genuinely feel like it would probably have to be like a one-off, but they could legitimately make like a horror movie that is just a Godzilla movie where it's just kind of like this. It's like a self-contained one-off, and maybe the reason they haven't done it necessarily is because it would probably just kind of, in a way, be a rehash of the original, like a remake. But I don't know. I think with the right creative team behind it, there's some value in that. Like, sure, you should watch the original no matter what, but I don't know that there'd be anything wrong with remaking the like basically the original, just updating it, obviously, and but I don't know. Maybe then it would just be glorifying the the fears and like adding
Yeah.
more deaths and blah 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 blah. So I don't know,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think as I mean, it is kind of like a horror movie. I mean, the subject matter definitely is it's horrifying, um, but yeah, I did also really like you were talking about like the two different sides. I really liked the scenes with Dr. Serizawa talking about not to get ahead, but the oxygen. What is it called? The
The
oxygen.
Destroyer.
Oxygen
Yeah,
destroyer.
oxygen destroyer. Because I have to imagine like these were similar conversations that the people that were making like in the Manhattan Project who are working on the atom bomb were having, where like once you set this free upon the world, everything changes. Like it's game over from there, because as soon as someone sees that that's possible, they're not going to stop until they can recreate it. And um, obviously, in this, it's understood that it died with him and whatever. But um, yeah, I mean, I completely understand his fear of unleashing that on the world, because once you let that out of the cage, then it's game over, and they're just gonna countries are just gonna weaponize it and take this tool and do horrific things with it. So, but I did like that sort of conversation that was had.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of go back to what Miranda had mentioned before about the moral dilemma of like, because you brought up Dr. Yamane. Dr. Yamane does not want to see Godzilla destroyed. He wants to study him because this is like the scientific discovery of the century in his eyes. And it does bring up a very good question. Should we destroy Godzilla in order to prevent more Tokyos from happening, or do we study his resistance to radiation and see if that could benefit mankind? You know, it's an interesting thing to think about. And I really like the idea that the film brings up.
It's also in the sense of it's fair. It's a fair question to ask, because it's only because of human interference with H bomb testing that it unleashes Godzilla. So it's not Godzilla's fault that he was unleashed. Like he was just,
Exactly.
or
Mhm.
I guess I'll say they, because it's never confirmed if it's a guy or girl. But Godzilla, they were
I don't think
unleashed
Godzilla
upon the
has a
world.
gender, to be honest.
I think you could just refer to him as he,
I'm
since
just gonna
So,
refer to him as he
yeah,
because even in like
because
the
it's an
MonsterVerse,
American version.
yeah, even in the MonsterVerse they call him he. It really doesn't matter. Godzilla can
Yeah,
be
yeah,
a
that's it.
Godzilla can be a guy or a girl. If you want to call Godzilla by she, go for it. It really doesn't matter because Godzilla has no gender in my eyes. But I'm just gonna
Okay.
refer to him as he
all
for
right. Mommy
simplicity's sake.
Godzilla
Oh
destroyed
my God!
Tokyo.
Stop!
Don't do that.
Stop!
Anyway, no, but yeah, I think it's also fair in that regard of it's not fair to kill him because he didn't ask to be unleashed upon the world. He's just walking around like what the heck is going on? Just kind of finding like just basically walking around like a baby because he doesn't know better, just going off of instinct. Um,
Oh, man, he seemed to be deliberately breathing fire on Tokyo during
but
that
yeah, it's
scene. I mean, why is he breathing fire at that point? I mean, I guess because he's being attacked. You
I
could
mean,
argue
they
yeah,
did
because he's being
electrocute him,
attacked. They
so
did electrocute him. Yes, this is
which
true.
doesn't work. Like, who thought that would work?
The Japanese Defense Force thought that would work. So,
Yeah. I mean, at least they didn't like shoot nuclear bombs at him like they do in like the American versions. Like
oh
this
well,
Godzilla
yeah.
creature who's radioactive. Let's shoot it with radioactive material.
No,
You really
there's
think that's gonna work?
not only that, but I'm pretty sure there's a Godzilla film where the Japanese Defense Force like brings up using a nuclear bomb and they say like no, we're not going to stoop to that
Mhm.
level. I forget what movie that is, but we'll talk about that when we get to that movie.
but yeah, I do think that's like another element to the argument that is also fair because I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, I would argue, and this is kind of a topic or a theme that they brought up in like the 2014 and beyond movies, but Godzilla basically is just a force of nature. So do you kill a
Exactly.
force of nature just
Mhm.
because we unleashed it? Like it's not
Yeah,
Godzilla's fault. It's our fault. But
exactly.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I wanted to circle back really quick before we move on to the 1956 American version. What did you guys think of the characters in this movie? Now, personally, I felt the only memorable characters were Dr. Yamane or Professor Yamane and Dr. Serizawa. I felt that Ogata and Emiko were pretty forgettable because to me personally, I just felt like Emiko was your standard like female protagonist, and like Ogata was just your standard like male protagonist, like standard main character. I didn't really feel like they were that memorable, but Serizawa and Yamane for sure are great characters. What did you guys think of the characters?
I liked the characters. Um, I think the main characters are probably um the doctor, or professor. I think in the American version they call him doctor, but in the captions for the Japanese it's professor. I'm not really sure what to refer to him as,
See,
but I'm
he's
just
a
gonna say
paleontologist, so I don't know if
yeah.
that would make him a doctor or professor. I would say
I
professor,
don't
but
know.
who cares?
Yeah, just to distinguish him from Dr. Serizawa, I'm just gonna call him the professor.
Yeah,
Um, I think he's a very interesting character because you get that
yeah,
emotion and like, do we attack Godzilla? Do we not attack Godzilla? And he wants to study him. And then like Emiko is his daughter, so that's kind of why she's there. I think they probably could have like given her more to do. Same with her not
uh, Ogata.
Ogata.
yeah, Ogata. They could have done a bit more, but I think
Yeah,
they're there to help with the like human story of the plot and like to drive the plot forward because without them you don't get to see Sarazawa or the oxygen destroyer like so like they're needed in order to like get that part of the element that part of the story so they can have the ending um so I think it all works well together. um Speaking of characters, I was listening to the commentary, and then at some point, there's a newsroom, and someone like comes in with newspapers and hands it to two people, and those are the two people who are the suit actors. And I think that I don't remember exactly, but I think that's like one of the only times you ever see their faces in the movies.
Well, that's interesting. I
So,
didn't know that.
I wish I could remember their names, but I
Well,
don't at the moment.
well, I think Subaraya is the main suit actor. I could be wrong because I'm looking at who we listed for special effects. I'd have to double check though. But yeah, man, I want to go into a little back. I don't know if you did any research. Oh, Udi, did you have anything to say real quick about the characters?
I was gonna say, I mean, basically the same things where um, I don't necessarily blame the actress because I'm sure that she probably just wasn't given a lot of direction or things to do. But in the first half, Amiko was pretty bad. I was like, "Eesh, her performance is like," eh." But then in the
Yeah.
second half, she got a lot better. Um, and I will say, I thought it was, I don't, maybe I'm misremembering, but I remember in the moment when they're, I think on like Odo Island or something like that, when they're like all running around everywhere because they're like finally seeing Godzilla. Her dad just like leaves her. They're like all running, and then she like falls, and she's
Yeah,
like, "Help, Dad!" And he just
he
runs
does.
off, and he's
He
like, "Oh
does.
my,
Yeah, he just
Godzilla!"
runs off.
And
I
then
mean,
she like gets saved.
well, I was just gonna say, to be fair, it's a giant freaking monster you're seeing for the first time. Like, you know, I
You're just gonna leave
guess
your daughter, and like, all right, screw you.
dude's
Like,
probably crapping his pants. He probably wasn't even thinking, honestly.
but weren't they just like in that moment? Weren't they only just running to see Godzilla, and not even to like run
Yeah, they
away?
were running up. Yeah, they were running up the hill for
Yeah,
safety.
they were no, they were running up the hill to see Godzilla, and then he shows himself, and like
Yeah,
Yamane gets a couple
and then-
pictures, and then they start running away, and then when they run
Yeah,
yeah,
away is when Emiko trips. Yeah.
yeah, okay. But yeah, I remember seeing that. I'm like, dude, you just abandoned your daughter with. I'm like, okay, all right. Like outside
Yeah.
of that, like that character is pretty good. But I remember that moment, like, what? Like, okay, sure, all right. Um, but yeah, outside of that, I mean, I agree. I think the professor and Doctor Serizawa are probably the best. Um, Ogata was okay. He wasn't excellent, but he wasn't bad. I mean, yeah, he was a pretty standard leading man, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what he felt like to me. He just felt like your standard, like, yeah, leading like male hero or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but
Um, oh, I wanted to say something
sure. Yeah.
before we move on. Um, Again, based off the commentary that I watched and a few of the interviews from the DVD I have, I think Emiko was a relatively like new actress too, so that could be why her like performance is a bit off. And I think um, I don't remember the second part that I was gonna say. Um, so we can move on now, I guess.
Well, I just wanted to talk about because you had mentioned one of the suit actors. So, like, I remember thinking, man, it would be so fun to like get in the Godzilla suit and just destroy miniature Tokyo, stomp around. But it
Um,
actually was not fun being
no.
the suit actor for Godzilla. It was really hot most of the time. They were
Mhm.
literally pouring buckets of sweat off the guy each time.
Yeah.
And like it got so hot one time that he passed out. Like
Mhm.
it sucked from what I've heard. There's a really cool
Mhm.
commercial out there. I'll link it to you guys after the episode, but it's a commercial for like I want to say a coffee company in Japan, but they do a commercial that is an homage to the original suit actor for Godzilla, and it's really cool. Like I said, I'll share it with you guys after the episode after we get done recording this episode. And but yeah, it sucked being in that suit from what I've
Yeah.
heard. Oh,
I
and
think it.
I just want to say real quick another thing. He couldn't see. Like he only went up to like I think Godzilla's chest in the actual suit, and he couldn't see, so he was just fumbling around the whole time. So that's why in most Godzilla movies, when it looks like he's just like stumbling around like a drunk, it's because they can't see out of the dang thing.
Yeah. Um. So they had like three holes in the chest piece of Godzilla. That's where the actor's head would be. So they had like breathing holes, but they couldn't see. And the original suit was not made out of breathable material or anything. It was like over 200 pounds, so like it was terrible to walk in. But they
Yeah.
still did like a lot of research and like went and studied animals to like try to add character to Godzilla instead of just being a human in a monster suit knocking things over. So there is like thought and behind all of Godzilla's movements, even though unfortunately the suit actors have a hard time seeing, hard time breathing, and like get firecrackers shot at them. Like they really, without them, there would be no Godzilla. So
Yeah.
they deserve as much praise like for eternity. So
Agreed. Pretty sure the suit caught on fire at one point too during filming.
it probably did.
All right. So with that, let's transition over into the American re-release coming out in 1956 and starring American actor Raymond Burr as Steve Martin. Not the actor Steve Martin, the character Steve Martin. Uh so um yeah, so this film was called Godzilla King of the Monsters, and it was recut using original footage and newly filmed footage of the aforementioned Steve Martin, who was visiting Japan when Godzilla attacks. It was released in the United States on April 27th, 1956. This version was co-directed by Terry O. Morse and Ishiro Honda. So, what did we all think of the 1956 re-release, Godzilla King of the Monsters?
Wasn't terrible. It wasn't necessarily great though.
Yeah.
Um, I think it was very clever what they did. Although they took a lot of like the deep and meaningful and impactful story out of it because again they were giving it to American audiences and I assume at the time they're like maybe we should take out the bombing stuff that, that might not be if they're trying to sell a movie to the American public. It might not be the best thing to put in there, so that I think they cut a lot of that back. Um, But I was reading like reviews and people are like, "This is terrible. It's garbage." And I'm like, "Actually, it's a pretty watchable film." I mean, if you're comparing it to the original, they're two very different like stories, but um like that makes sense cuz it's a different movie. Um but I think like the special effects and stuff that they did to get um Raymond Burr into the movie was like very clever. A lot of like over the shoulder shots and like obscure hiding of people's faces and stuff of that nature. Um, was really cool to like see that like they thought of this. I mean, they could have just released the original Godzilla, um, but I don't think it would have gone as well in the 50s as it like does today. So
Yeah, I want to say, the scenes with Raymond Burr in them, I will give the movie credit. Those scenes did not feel out of place. Like when I was watching it, and then they had the scenes with Raymond Burr in them, I was like, all right, you know, I can't tell that these are clearly just reshot scenes that they put into it. No, like if I think they did a good job blending in Raymond Burr's scenes with the footage from the original movie. That being said, I agree with mostly everybody in that the American version of this movie is just simply not as good as the 1954 original. And I think the main reason why is because while the 1954 original was focused on being kind of like an anti-nuclear message and having its own deep themes, the American version was like, let's just give them a monster movie. Because that's what it is.
mhm.
That's what Godzilla King of the Monsters is. It is just a monster movie because like the whole like anti-nuclear message is lost, like you were saying, Miranda. They kind of just took that out of the movie. They mentioned the H-bomb testing, I think, once,
Yeah, like
but
one time.
yeah,
Um,
uh, but that's it. Like they completely like remove the because one of the most thought-provoking aspects about the original 1954 Godzilla is the film's ending. When Professor Yamane says that if we continue with these nuclear bomb tests, another Godzilla may appear. They took that out of the 1956 re-release. It's just, yay, we defeated Godzilla, we won, yay, we did it, Patrick, we saved the city. Like that, and just that entire message is just lost. past, and that's that's the biggest issue that I have with this re-release.
Yeah, like Miranda said, I mean, by itself, it's fine, but when you compare it to the original and like everything that the original stood for, it's like a slap in the face. It just completely takes the soul out of what it was supposed to be and sterilizes it because American audiences can't freaking like they can't just come to terms with things that the country does. And so like yeah, it's totally watchable. It's fine, but I also kind of hate it because I hate things that do that because I just hate that we can never just acknowledge things that the country does and just talk about it. We can never just like confront the things that we've done. Um, and it's funny, it's funny to think that this was done in the 50s and like stuff like that still happens today, where especially like whenever Americans decide to remake like a foreign film that is like super highly rated and highly like well reviewed, whatever, and then like, oh, we'll remake it, and then they remake it for American audiences and just like a dumbed down piece of crap compared to the original. It's like even today it's still happening, and it's just infuriating, and
Yeah.
I just hate when you like remake something and then just sterilize it down to the point where like you either you didn't understand it or you diluted the point of why it existed in the first place.
Yeah,
I
no,
think,
I agree. Go ahead, Miranda.
yeah, I think another thing is like people don't like reading subtitles. I know that's a big thing. It's like people won't watch foreign movies because they don't want to read subtitles. It's like all of the rest of the world reads subtitles when they watch our movie. At least we can watch their movies with subtitles. Like it's not that hard. I mean, if you have trouble reading and like that stuff, obviously, like I'm not talking to those people. But like it's not that hard. Just put the captions on. You watch Netflix with captions on already, I'm assuming, like most people do. So just it's just in a different language. Learn some stuff, watch some cool stuff. There's tons of films out there to watch that are important to the film industry, to people in those countries, and they have a different point of view. Like, for example, Parasite is a really great movie, or Train to Busan, also a great movie, and those are like Korean movies, but people won't watch them because they're in a different language, and it's dumb.
Don't you worry,
Speaking of
because Parasite is getting an American remake.
Oh, why? Why? Just watch the original.
That was announced last year or so. So I don't know if that's still happening, but from what I remember, it is supposed to be getting an American remake. So yeah.
speaking of Parasite, I think it was Bong Joon-ho, which is like who is like the director of Parasite, who said this, but it's funny that you brought that up because I'm pretty sure he said Um, like if you go over like the 1 inch barrier of subtitles, it opens up a whole world of brand new, like amazing, spectacular movies. And it's so true. Just recently I watched this movie that came out in 2021 called The Worst Person in the World.
Dude, I watched
And
that as well.
oh really nice.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I hadn't even realized it till I looked at my letterbox list after watching it. 2021, for some reason, I just watched a bunch of like bigger budget, like blockbuster movies. Like I still watch a good amount of movies, but a lot of them were just more mainstream. I hadn't watched as many foreign or like indie movies for some reason. I don't know, just didn't work out. But literally, I watched The Worst Person in the World once. It's a foreign film, and immediately became my number one of the year. Like that's the power of just getting over the 1 inch barrier of watching a foreign film and just having to read a little bit. It's really not that big of a deal, and it opens up a plethora of
There's
like amazing movies.
Exactly. There are some really, really good foreign films out there. And come on, like Miranda was saying, unless you have a lot of trouble reading, which at that point I completely understand, it's not that hard to read subtitles. Come on. You can do it.
No,
They
but
were in the most recent Marvel movie, Black Panther, Black Panther,
Wanda Forever.
Wakanda Forever.
Wakanda
They
forever.
had like three different languages in it and subtitles. I did, or Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings. Is that the full title? I don't know. that also
Yeah,
had
and the
subtitles.
Legend of the
So
Ten
And the
even
Rings.
your
Legend of the
like
Ten Rings, yeah.
more mainstream movies that like have subtitles. So like just imagine if it's like 30 minutes more of a movie. If you could read it for a Marvel movie, you could read it for the classic like fantastic cinema like Godzilla, which everyone
Yeah,
should watch because it's great.
there
The
are
American
like
version, not so.
agreed. There are like other movies too where like Inglorious Bastards has a good amount of subtitles because they're speaking like German and other languages and throughout and like French and I don't remember what other languages, but like there's short scenes where it's just subtitled and they're speaking other languages, but no one complains because it's a Quentin Tarantino movie. And then like just recently, the movie Babylon came out, and I know it's a very controversial movie. I'm not going to get into that, but throughout the movie, there's a Latinx character who constantly speaking Spanish, and to my surprise, there's a lot of it that isn't even subtitled. I don't know if it's because the director was assuming that you would just kind of understand the gist of what he's saying based on like his intonation and his delivery, but there's a lot of it that isn't subtitled. And I remember sitting there watching and like for me it's fine because I understand what he's saying. But I'm like, it's kind of odd. And I like in a weird way, I almost kind of liked it selfishly. But also it stood out to me because I'm like, usually this would be like all subtitled and it's not. But it's a whole other we don't have to get into that. But yeah.
Well, and then to kind of just go back on things like, because Miranda, you were saying earlier that, oh, people like hate this version of the movie. And I do agree with you guys. It's watchable. Like, if you really are too lazy to read subtitles and you want to watch the very first Godzilla movie, you can watch this. I don't recommend it. I recommend watching the original, but if you just really cannot read the subtitles, then fine, you can watch this. You're not going to get the same experience though as watching the original. And I think that's why people hate this so much is because they take the messages and themes from the original and they just dumb it down for American audiences. And yeah, that's why you always see people saying, "Oh, this sucks," this version sucks. I mean, if you're like cuz when I was a kid, I would watch this version all the time when watching the first Godzilla movie. I didn't start getting into the original Japanese version until I got older. Like, this is fine if you're a kid, obviously. But, I can understand the hate that this version gets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean there's like
Like
oh sorry.
uh like if you're a kid and you watch it, that's cool. But we it's also the first introduction of Godzilla to the American audience. So this is the version people watched when they were like teenagers or kids or whatever. So this is the version of Godzilla that like we know, and it's very different from like obviously the Japanese version of Godzilla. But I don't think it like ruins any of the story. I mean, or the iconicness of Godzilla. I think now that we're in the 21st century, Godzilla is a creature of many different faces and themes and ideas. And if you want to start with that one, go ahead because, like, that's what people know. Um, I mean, it's at least better than maybe some other ones. But I
Yeah.
haven't watched all of them, so I don't know yet. So that
I
might
I
change.
I, I would watch this over like freaking All Monsters Attack or otherwise known as Godzilla's Revenge any day. So uh, so do we have any more thoughts on the 1956 re-release? Because I will say real quickly that, I do find it interesting how this movie begins because this movie kind of begins after the attack on Tokyo and like the rest of the movie is kind of like a flashback while the 54 original is just told in sequential order. So I did find that kind of interesting, and I also find it kind of funny how Raymond Burr's character Steve Martin wasn't even supposed to be in Japan during the Godzilla attack. He was supposed to go on an assignment in Cairo, but he just stopped by in Japan to say hi to Dr. Serizawa because I guess in this version Dr. Serizawa is a friend from college, which is kind of weird if you think about it, because that does
Yeah, that is kind of
because
weird.
that means either Dr. Serizawa attended college in the United States or Steve Martin attended college in Japan. So,
But the thing is, he doesn't really know Japanese because he has a
yeah,
person translating
not
everything. He's
not
like,
only
I'm a bit
that,
rusty on my Japanese. What are
yeah.
they saying?
But not only that, there are certain scenes in the movie where like they show like they're just showing footage from the original
Mhm,
1954 film and they have the guy translating. But then there's
mhm.
other scenes where they just dub it over in English. So it's like, all right, are they just speaking English now for Steve Martin's benefit? Like what's going on here?
Yeah, like in the like Parliament or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They get up there to do their like testimonies, and all of a sudden they're speaking English, and it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
um, you could have just kept the Japanese.
Yeah,
Like,
and just have the translator guy
or
tell Steve Martin what's going on.
there's some scenes where the characters are like speaking, but they'll put the English dub over it, and I'm like, based off my knowledge of the original and what the captions say they are saying, that's not what they're saying. Like, they changed the dialogue, but like kept them act the obviously because they can't go back and reshoot because it's a recut of the movie. It's like, you could have just kept the original dialogue, but I guess since it's a recut and they like mashed
So
it all up together. But
yeah, I was gonna say I notice a lot of that, like with some things, because like they don't exactly repeat word for word what the characters are saying in the dub sometimes. Like I know with anime, like if you're watching anime on Netflix and you have the subtitles turned on, but you're watching the English dub, the dub does not match the subtitles because the subtitles are the Japanese dialogue and then they re-edit like the English dialogue for the dub. And I think they mainly do that in anime to like kind of make the lip syncing match better. But yeah, for a live action movie, like I don't know why they feel the need to change certain things.
I was gonna add that as like an experiment, it's interesting, I guess, but again, I just feel like by stripping the original of its reason for existing, it's a completely different experience. And like you said, I mean, it's fine. Like especially if like a kid was watching it's like their first one, it's like they're not really gonna understand the message of the original. I mean, they're not gonna have probably the context of all of that. So I mean, like I don't know, but as like an experiment, it's interesting. But I don't know. I still feel like it's you're doing yourself a disservice by watching this
No,
version.
I agree. Yeah, you are. Just come on, you can read subtitles. You can do it. I believe in you. But I will say that the one thing about both the 1954 film and this film that bothers me the most, and this is just a nitpick, it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but they say that dinosaurs lived 2 million years ago, and that just bothers the heck out of me, man. It's like, come on. It was not
yeah,
2 million years ago.
I noticed that. It's like
Yeah.
they said Jurassic period, Cretaceous
Y-
period, 2 million
Yeah.
years ago. And then they don't even change it for the American version to like
Exactly. They don't
correct
change
it.
it. See,
They keep that.
was that just what they believed in the 50s that dinosaurs existed 2 million years ago? I don't know.
I mean, I don't think so,
Yeah.
but I don't know. They also did some weird things. Like in the original, Godzilla is 165 feet tall,
Yeah.
and then for no reason they're like he's 400 feet tall in the
Yeah,
new
they
one.
they made him
Just like,
400 feet. Yeah. Well,
wow.
he's supposed to be 50 meters, which yeah, I think what you said is like 165 feet. So, yeah, I don't know why they did that.
Maybe they thought it'd be scarier.
Maybe. Yeah, they can change. Like you were what you were gonna say. They can change his height, but they can't correct the time period at which dinosaurs were alive. Come on.
Speaking of dinosaurs, I have a fact to share. Um, so in this book called Godzilla FAQ, it says that they wanted the monsters look to be like cross between a Tyrannosaurus and an iguana, with like Stegosaurus like plates running down its back, a massive tail, and rough alligator like skin to simulate the scarring of radioactive burn victims, which I think you mentioned earlier. But
And I got
yeah,
my fun Godzilla fact of the day. So Godzilla's name in Japanese, as we all know, is Gojira, and that is the combining of two Japanese words, gorilla and whale, which are gorira and jiro. Combined together, you get Gojira.
so Godzilla is a gorilla whale, which
Gorilla
like
whale, yes.
yeah, which makes sense. I mean, kind of. I mean, they saw King Kong 1933, and
Yeah, that
like
was one
they
of the big inspirations behind this film. Sorry, I just want to mention that real quick. The original King
yeah
Kong, big inspiration.
yeah it was, and they wanted to do the movie in stop motion, but that
Yeah,
would
they
have
did
taken like
actually.
7 years. So that's
Yeah,
why they went with suitmation or
yeah.
suit actors, and that's what they continued on through. Well, I think until 1990. No,
I think all of the
yeah,
Toho Godzilla
1998.
movies. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure all of the Toho Godzilla movies use suitmation except for,
Hmm.
or I don't know, did Shin Godzilla use suitmation? I know they use CG for some scenes, but I don't remember if they used the suit at all. I think they
Yeah, I
did.
don't know. I haven't watched that one yet. So,
Yeah, I don't remember honestly. But yeah, all right. Well, I mean, that's pretty much it for. I mean, is there anything else we want to add for the 1956 American re-release of Godzilla 1954, otherwise known as Godzilla King of the Monsters?
mm,
I think no.
Is it time for our lizard fact of the day, Miranda?
sure, it could be time for our lizard fact of the day. Today's lizard is very relevant. So, um, I'll post the image of the lizard on our Instagram so you can see what it looks like there. But today's lizard is the marine iguana, specifically the Godzilla marine iguana. There is a subspecies of lizard named after Godzilla. So that is really cool.
Awesome,
So
actually.
yeah, so the marine iguana is found in the Galapagos Islands. It's a unique lizard because it's like one of the only ones that spends time in the marine environment. It lives in colonies on rocky shores and um, can be found in marshes and beaches. They are currently considered vulnerable by the International Union of Conservation of Nature and the Natural Resources. There's that fact. And my last little fact is that they typically range from 12 to 56 centimeters, so snout to vent length, and then their tail ranges from 17 to 86 centimeters. They're quite large. So that's our lizard
Yeah.
fact for the day.
Awesome. I had no idea there was a lizard named after Godzilla. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it makes sense. Like Godzilla is a lizard, a water
Yeah.
lizard, and the water lizard, and like, yeah, my
Yeah.
own name is Godzilla.
Okay, really random, but I'm pretty sure like the 1998 Godzilla is supposed to be a mutated marine iguana, now that I think about it. All right. Well, I think let's go on to ratings. What would we rate both the 1954 Godzilla and the 1956 re-release? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay. Go for it, Duty.
Um, I'm stuck somewhere between like a 4 and a 4.5 for the 1954, but I'll be generous. I'll give it a 4.5. And then for the 1956 version, I will be very much not generous. I'm gonna give it a 2-star rating. So yeah.
I think 2 out of 5 is pretty average for Letterboxd ratings on it. So
What can I say? I'm a walking, breathing cliche.
what are your scores, Dan?
All right, so for the original 1954 film, I'm going to give it 4 stars. And then for the 1956 re-release, I'm probably going to go 2.5.
I would just like to say, for the record, Dan does not have a single 5-star movie on Letterboxd. So technically, for all intents and purposes, this is a 5-star movie. Just to be clear.
Udi would be right. I don't have a single movie rated 5 stars yet on Letterboxd, but maybe one of these days. Maybe one of these days, we'll see.
Like, all of my favorite movies are rated 5, whether they're good or bad, so I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna, like, affect this average here. I'm gonna give it 5 out of 5. Mainly
Perfect.
just because it's a good film and I enjoy it and I was fully entertained by it the whole time I first watched it, and it made me want to watch more Godzillas. So that's why.
Yes.
Also, it's great story, great acting, great special effects, all that. And then for the American remake, I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. Mainly because it's not a terrible movie. It's still watchable. You still have to like think of all the acting that comes from the original movie, and I think it's pretty clever how they like cheat the story there to like not cheat. Like, I think it's clever how they incorporated another character in there.
Yeah, I agree.
So now I get to do math. And I can tell you the Atomic Lizard's average score.
Drum roll, please.
As a quick side, or quick aside / fun fact, while Miranda is mathing, don't ask me why because I don't know, but I'm pretty sure the model that is known as the R34 Nissan Skyline is nicknamed the Godzilla. Again, don't remember why, but I just figured I'd toss that in there.
Interesting. It just reminds me of there was an ad for the 2014 Godzilla. It was a car commercial, and like in the commercial, Godzilla's just eating cars for some reason. Just reminded me of that commercial forward.
I think it was actually the R32 Nissan Skyline, not the R34. It says why the Nissan GTR was nicknamed Godzilla. Notes that the R32 race car won every single Japanese touring car championship from 1990 to 1993. This string of victories, along with big wins across Europe and Australia, prompted one Australian magazine to call the speedy Nissan Godzilla in a cover story. So there we go.
Nice.
Nice. Good job, Japan.
Nice.
You can get the Godzilla in Need for Speed Unbound, by the way. In case
Oh,
you wanted
really?
to complete, yeah.
Sounds like I have a goal card to reach. What's it called?
It's the R32 Nissan
The
Skyline.
R32 Nissan Skyline. All right, I
Yeah.
will keep that
You'll
in
have the
mind.
Godzilla car
Get the
for the
Godzilla
Godzilla
car.
#1 fan. Number
Exactly.
one Godzilla fan. I said that backwards.
I mean, I'll take that title.
I think I have the math done correctly.
I'm not going to check it, so whatever you tell me, I'll believe.
Okay, so for Godzilla 1954, we have a 4.5 out of 5.
Nice.
And then for Godzilla King of the Monsters, we have a 2.5 out of 5. So,
Sounds about right.
yeah, that makes logical sense there.
Yep.
So there's that. Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about? Because I have a few few fun facts if you're interested in hearing them.
Sure,
Go
lay him
ahead.
out.
Okay, so watching the movie, there's a point where a radio operator is operating the radio, and he's like SOS, and it turns out SOS is universal. It doesn't actually stand for like save our souls or save our ship. SOS is just really easy to do in Morse code because it's dot 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 dash 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 dot dot dot, I think.
Okay, that
And
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, so it's universal because that interested me when I watched the movie, and I was like, I have to find this out. So that's a fun fact. Um, Also, wouldn't the H bomb or not H bomb, the oxygen destroyer destroy all of the oxygen, so then there would be no water left? Is that just a thing that they just ignored and was like, yeah, it only affects air breathing creatures and fish, but not like water itself?
Honestly, it was probably just a thing they just didn't address.
Okay,
It's just the
because
MacGuffin used to destroy Godzilla, and that's about it.
yeah, because um, that's another thing that I was like, how does this work?
Yeah.
But if I didn't know if they explain it later on in other movies or if it's just a random thing that
Yeah. I
is
will
just
say
there.
the oxygen destroyer is brought up again in another film, but we will save it for that movie.
Okay, I'll keep note of that.
Yeah.
Um.
It'll be a while though before we get to that movie.
Oh.
So don't get your
I
hopes
may
up too
not
quickly.
I may
Okay.
not be much of a Godzilla fan, but I know which movie it is.
Do you though, Udi? Do you?
I do.
Because I think you're thinking of a different movie. I mean, it is in
Well,
that movie. It's brought up in two movies, but yeah,
well, I know one of them, so
yeah, he knows one of them.
I'm pointing at the camera, which
Yeah.
you can't see, but I'm pointing at it. I know.
Shoot, there was another thing I wanted to mention about. I can't remember though about the film. I don't remember. Dang it.
Is it a really great movie film, a movie that you should see in movie theaters?
It
Because
just it's a movie that feels like a movie.
that's the Atomic Lizard's review.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the Atomic Lizard's review. Yeah,
It's our
it's a
review.
movie that feels like a movie.
I would
Yeah.
say it's a movie that feels like a film, but
Real film movie.
It's true
A movie
Kaino.
you should go see at the movie theater because it's a very movie-like movie.
I hope they
Uh,
re-release it for an anniversary or something so I can go see it in a movie theater because I think that'd be really
I would
cool.
love to go see the original 1954 Godzilla at the theater. That'd be awesome.
well, if you wait one more year, they probably will. God dang it.
Hopefully. Okay, I have two more facts if you guys are interested in hearing.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Bane.
Godzilla's iconic roar was made by dragging a resin-coated leather glove up and down a double bass and then played the sound in slow motion. So that's cool. And then there is actually a third version of the original movie and the American version. Um,
One is also really bad.
there's no official release of this version of the movie, but it is the Italian colorized original Godzilla movie. I think people refer to it as Kozira or something like that.
Just
But
they did a really bad job trying to colorize it. It's awful. I haven't watched it myself, but from the footage I've seen, it looks terrible.
yeah. Apparently the reason they recolored it, or they decided to color it, is because in 1977 or around that time, they're like, no one's gonna see a black and white movie, so they took the movie and recolored it. But there's no official copies of it, so I think the movies should just stay in black and white because that's how they were made. So
Yeah.
that's all my fun facts.
Hmm.
Is there anything else you guys want to talk about?
Like I said, there was something I wanted to mention earlier, but I can't remember now. God dang it. It was something interesting. Oh, I guess one thing is the how the original 1954 film begins is actually somewhat inspired by a real event because when they
Hmm.
were testing the H bomb at Bikini Atoll, there was a Japanese fishing boat that was caught in the blast. And they were unaware of the tests going on. So the beginning of
Yeah.
the movie is somewhat inspired by that unfortunate event right there.
Yeah, I think it's called the Lucky Dragon disaster,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that does it for the first official episode of Atomic Lizards, a
Ooh, ooh,
Godzilla
ooh.
review podcast and other movies.
And other
Yes,
movies coming soon.
we
Yeah, coming
Yeah.
yeah,
soon.
yeah, coming soon. um, yeah, so yeah, that's our first episode. So just to recap, Godzilla 1954, our rating is 4.5 out of 5, and our rating for Godzilla King of the Monsters 1956 is 2.5 out of 5. Thank you so much for joining us and listening to our conversation about Godzilla. I hope you learned some cool facts today. If you're interested in hearing more, please follow us on Instagram at Atomic Lizards Pod, and check out all of our reviews on Letterboxd at atomic_lizards.